Okay.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to discuss a very important topic, which is DC statehood. This conversation will be recorded for anyone who may not was able to be here today. So we want to make sure that it's being placed on both AAUW Washington, DC website, as well as the League of Women Voters DC website. So without further ado, my name is Kim Webster. I am the president of the American Association of University of Women, Washington, DC branch. And today we are going to talk about DC statehood, yay! There is so much to discuss, and there's some exciting news that's coming up. And what the branch decided to do was to partner with the League of Women's Voter, DC, to have this conversation about, number one, what is DC statehood? And then number two, what is it that both of our branches and anyone else can do to help move forward this historical bill that's in the House right now. Actually, it's in the Senate right at this point. And after we go through what DC statehood is, what Ann is also going to do is talk about some of the exciting next steps, which is, of course, the actual Senate hearing that's coming up that Ann will talk a little bit about, but also after that, what's next? So the format of this discussion is going to be kind of free-flowing, really flexible. I'm going to be monitoring the chat area. So if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to know, put it in the chat bar and I will pose the question to Ann. And so my responsibility is to make sure that everyone's questions or comments get placed into Ann's queue to answer at some point. So that's pretty much what the format is going to be. I want to introduce to you today Miss Ann Anderson. She is the chair of the DC League's Committee on Full Rights for DC Citizens. She has lived in DC since 1964 and has advocated for DC statehood since 1971. She's a clinical social worker with a private practice here in Washington, DC, named the Washington Therapy Guild. She has 3 DC native-born children and 3 grandchildren. And it's an interesting story how we came together. Several years ago, one of our branch members, Harriet, requested a meeting with the DC League about partnership and about this very topic. And they met last minute in Harriet's house with a chalkboard. And so fast forward, when the DC statehood came up again on our branch, Harriet said, wait a second, I remember this meeting we had with someone from the League of Women Voters. You should reach out to them. And so I absolutely took her advice, reached out to Ann, and here we are. And so this is going to be a great relationship moving forward. But this is the first step. And the first step is, of course, educating individuals what DC statehood is. And then the next step would be for both of our organizations to do whatever we need to do, whether it's grassroots, email campaign, marketing campaign, phone calls, or whatever it takes to get this bill passed in the Senate. The idea is for our branch to leverage our national network and to pretty much use the name AAUW to try and have our AAUW members in those states that are opposed to DC statehood to get them to go talk to their representatives. So that's just the short of it. Once we get everything finalized, we will absolutely let those who are interested know more and let anyone who is interested in participating and trying to help us to ensure that DC becomes the 51st state. And so again, for those who are to the newcomers, we are recording this. So if you find that you have to jump off, we will definitely put the recording on both of our websites. So without further ado, Miss Ann Anderson. Yay.
Thanks, Kim. It's really delightful to be here, and the meeting at Harriet's was even more interesting than you're describing, because we had our first attempt to do a PowerPoint, and she had a sheet up across her bookshelf because we didn't have a screen. And so it was, and it was very nice. And the AAUW people who joined us had really wonderful feedback. So that was our alpha. And so we were able to move to our beta.
I like that. I like that. And
this might be our zeta at this point.
If all goes well, right?
Yeah, we've been moving right along here. So what I'd like to do at this point is to share my screen. And I'm going to make sure that I have this. Yes, there's the right one. Okay, and let's get it at the front. And come on. There we go. Okay. So this is just all the information. You know, the National League and the Voter Education Fund and the DC government has helped us get here. So I wanted to make sure that they were acknowledged. So this is going to be some basic facts, because I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And then you can raise your hand or put it in the chat if you have a question. So let's just be very clear. Most of us believe that for democracy to work for all of us, it must include us all. But Americans today living in DC are barred from having an equal voice in voting representation in Congress simply because of where they live. You know, so it's time now to use our voice. So at this point, one of the things I want to point out, because to put this in context, is the insurrection on January 6th. It really brought our lack of security home. And Mayor Bowser's hands were tied. But if she'd been a governor, she could have called out the DC National Guard on her own. And she could have also called the other neighboring governors for help, just governor to governor, like they all do. So we know from surveys we've done that people know a whole lot more. So education is really important, but there's still misunderstandings. And so this is why we're doing this. And just to be clear, throughout our history, the League of Women Voters has fought to ensure more Americans have our right to vote be honored, and that every American can cast our vote and have it counted. So we're nonpartisan, we're activists, we're a grassroots organization that believes that voters should play a critical role in democracy. And we've been working on this since 1938. So let's start off with a quick poll on DC history. So when did we lose congressional representation? So put your note in the chat. You know, did we never have it? Was it when the Virginia side went back to Virginia? Was it 1801? Was it 1789 when the Constitution was adopted? What do you all think? Just, you know, take a guess if you don't know, because I'm going to tell you what the answer is. No worries, no worries. All right. So here we go. 1801. That's the correct answer. So I'm going to condense almost 200 years of history in a few sentences. So feel free to ask me more details if you feel like you need them. But back in 1801, US citizens, many of whom had fought in the Revolutionary War and were living in DC, were still able to vote in all the Maryland and Virginia elections, because DC and Virginia, or Maryland and Virginia, made DC. They gave land to make DC. And so during the 10 years after DC had been established, they could still vote in their original states. But when Congress moved to DC and passed the Organic Act of 1801, that immediately disenfranchised everyone living in DC. So the congressional record shows that they were concerned back then, even then, about turning DC citizens into subjects. So the idea that the founding fathers wanted it this way, not true, not true. Okay, so many arrangements for local government were tried over the years, but Congress continued to exercise total control over DC as described in the Constitution. In 1847, this is an important date, they reduced the size of the district when they sent the Virginia side back to Virginia after the people on the Virginia side voted to retrocede and Virginia voted to receive them. So this established a clear precedent that Congress is able to reduce the size of the district. Now, in the 1870s, they even established a territorial government. But when it became clear that there would be many African Americans elected in DC, among other reasons, Congress changed the arrangement to a presidentially appointed commission. It was a dictatorial arrangement that lasted for nearly 100 years. And I want to tell you, I'm not quoting some of the things that were said in the congressional record because we don't need to hear that kind of language. But jumping forward 100 years, in the 1960s, in 1961, the 23rd Amendment was passed. Now that allowed DC citizens to vote for president. So please note that when Douglas Commonwealth is admitted as a state, it will not have anything any longer to do with the 23rd Amendment, which applies to the federal district, which will still be under total control of Congress. So Congress will decide how to manage the 3 electoral votes that apply to the federal district. So I'll talk about that more later. But in that 23rd Amendment allowed us to vote for the first time since 1801 for president in 1964. And in the 60s, President Johnson started the transition to more locally based government. And Congress finally established this limited home rule government in 1973. But just like in the 1870s, they can dissolve it at will. Then if we jump forward to 2016, the DC residents voted overwhelmingly November 8th to petition for statehood with a new constitution and boundaries. And then in 2020, HR 51 passed the House and it passed it again in this year. And now the Senate bill S51 has been introduced with a record number of original co-sponsors. So as you can see from the beginning, DC residents called for full rights and full representation. So this is a 220-year-old fight. Let's look and see how it works now. So on the left, you see how we work now. Our 8 wards elect representatives to the DC Council, along with 5 at-large members. Our mayor functions like a governor with many state and county functions, as well as normal municipal tasks. The council passes legislation, the mayor signs it, but nothing becomes law until Congress has its review, and which can take months. And they get to review it, and then fortunately, all they have to do is object. They no longer have to approve everything. Our judges are appointed by the president with no voting representation in the House and not even a voice in the Senate. We're cut out of any decision-making at the national level. So let's look at the map of the new state along with the federal district. By the way, the boundaries of the federal district are pretty close to the security zone that was established after the insurrection. So the capital city that people think of will all be encompassed by the new federal district. The national government buildings, the mall, the monuments, the monumental core of the district. But with the federal district still present, we're constitutional because the Constitution says there shall be a federal district not to exceed 10 miles square. And Congress has already reduced the size before the Civil War, as we've already mentioned. So the territory where 700,000 people live will be in the new state. And we know we can become a state with simple majority vote because that's how the other 37 have been included. So by recognizing DC as a state, we can ensure the full rights and honor the equal freedoms of every American, no matter our color, our party, our zip code, to make this a place where we all have a say in the decisions that affect our families, our communities, and our country. So I want to show you this additional map, which is done by the mayor's office, because it actually tries to show you what's in there. The federal enclave, there's the US Capitol, there's the Washington Monument, Lincoln Memorial. And then it also populates some of the things in the new state. There are cathedrals, there are convention centers, there's the Capital One Arena, a stadium, the Frederick Douglass House. By the way, Douglass Commonwealth is Fort Frederick Douglass. So the other thing I want to tell you is that one key fact: when this boundary was set up around the federal enclave, they made sure there were no licensed residential buildings in there. So nobody lives in the federal district, except, of course, the people in the White House, but they are not registered in DC. They were registered in their home state. And by the way, I've also included this iconic DC League picture that was taken at a National League convention, just so you know. It's been going on for a while. So what it would mean to be a state? Well, Congress regularly tries to impose social policies on DC, and many of them are discriminatory. We don't have time to explore all the effects of being a colony of the Congress, but if DC were granted statehood, we would lower the likelihood of these future policy failures, like these examples of historic injustice in the district. For instance, during the years that Congress prevented our needle exchange program, we ended up with the highest HIV/AIDS rate in the nation. So these things are not, sort of esoteric. I mean, they affect lives. And, during the couple of years where we were able to run a needle exchange program, our infection rate dropped substantially. So then, because Congress also has control of our local tax dollars, they prevented us from using them to help low-income women. And by the way, the DC budget, that's the latest one proposed by the current administration, doesn't have that prohibition for the first time in about 25 years. And Congress usually treats DC as if it were a state when distributing block grants. For instance, usually about 500 times in a session, they say, and these block grants should go to the 50 states and Washington, DC. But last year, they went out of their way to name us as a territory in the COVID relief bill, which shorted us by $750 million. Recently, the COVID relief bill that was passed has made DC whole again. But, you know, for a whole year, we didn't have those monies to help. And of course, as I've already mentioned, on January 6th, if our mayor had been a governor, she could have called up the DC National Guard immediately. Now, if you, I mean, those of you who live here can imagine how it would have changed things if suddenly the National Guard had, even if they hadn't been able to go onto the Capitol grounds without an okay from the federal government. Can you imagine the Capitol being surrounded at the edge of the Capitol grounds by a National Guard? I mean, all of those people that just walked off and went home would not have been able to walk off and go home. So it really would have changed the dynamics of that day completely. So I just want to say one more thing about the discriminatory policies. For the record, the racism that's displayed is often not subtle. It ranges from microaggressions to intended insults. For instance, in 1967, when our newly appointed Mayor Commissioner Walter Washington submitted his first budget to the House District Committee, Chairman John McMillan responded by sending a truckload of watermelons to his office. So we've tried many ways to get full rights for DC citizens, and it's become clear that in order to be on an equal footing with the rest of the country, the residential and commercial parts of DC need to be admitted as a state. So how do we do that? All right, this is from the Constitution. It's Congress that admits new states into the Union. It's not anybody else. And by the way, state boundaries can't be changed without the consent of the state. Remember, Virginia had to vote to agree to have the part of Virginia that was in DC go back to Virginia. So people are asking, why not go back to Maryland? You know, retrocession. Well, Maryland would have to agree to that change of boundaries. But in 1990, supermajorities of the Maryland legislature voted against retrocession. And most of the Maryland congressional delegation are co-sponsors of the Washington, D.C. Admission Act. They don't want us. So there's not any other way to do this. We have to go through Congress. And by the way, in case it matters, DC citizens voted to apply for statehood. All right, common questions. Is it constitutional? That always comes up. Yes, because there's still a federal district that Congress has complete control over as mandated by the Constitution. Does it need a constitutional amendment? No, all states after the first 13 were admitted by majority vote of both houses and signature of the president. So let me just say a little something more about that, because Joe Manchin has been talking about it needing to be constitutional. Well, one of the things they're doing is fudging things. So they say, well, RFK, Robert F. Kennedy said it needed a constitutional amendment. Well, that was back in the 1960s when they were talking about including the whole of DC as a state. And I agree with them. If you were going to take all of DC, leaving no federal district, you would need a constitutional amendment. But that's not what S51 is doing. It reserves a 2 square mile piece of land for the federal district, and Congress still has total control over that part. So we are constitutional. Okay. Oh, are we too small? Well, you know, the two-party or the two house system, the bicameral system that we have, decided from the very beginning that, you know, every state, no matter how small, or big would have 2 senators. So yeah, but in any case, population of DC is larger than 2 states, on par with 6. Just in terms of partisanship, well, you know, the National League, the League of Women Voters, is nonpartisan. So let's just be talking about that. We've been working for full rights for DC citizens since 1938. We understand that lack of self-government at the local level and lack of representation in the national legislature, these are civil and human rights violations. So we're not, you know, this is not about partisan. In terms of, oh, but it's going to be two Democratic senators. Well, let's remember Hawaii and Alaska, which were the last 2 states that were brought in, and they were brought in because they wanted to be sure that there was a Democrat state and a Republican state. And guess what? They flipped. They flipped. And so now Alaska's Republican and it came in Democrat, and Hawaii leans Democrat and came in Republican. And, you know, we have no idea what people are going to do once we're a state. But in any case, barring full representation in both houses of Congress, because of how people might vote, is a partisan political, you know, suppression of votes. So for democracy to work for all of us, it has to include us all. All right. I want to know a little bit about what your friends and neighbors say about DC statehood. And this will be very helpful because, you know, we are so in our bubble. It'd be really lovely to know how, what you hear. You know, does anybody even talk about it? Do you, you know, are there, you know, what kinds of comments do you hear? And so if you wouldn't mind putting a couple of lines in the chat, we'd love to hear your comments, and we'll use them for future planning because this always helps us to understand. So then I want to talk a little bit about, because Kim, you and I have been talking about how we work together. And so I wanted to just talk a little bit about, because we've been doing lots of outreach to other, we call ours chapters, you call yours branches. So we now have a national policy priority at the national level, which is really helpful. So we have sister leagues in all 50 states, and there are more than 700 communities. And so what we've done for the last 5 years is we've zoomed in with these kinds of presentations to educate and activate the membership. And we also work locally with the DC Statehood Coalition and AAUW of DC, little local organizations called, there's one in my neighborhood called Huddle for the Future, as well as the DC Mayor's office and Eleanor Holmes Norton's office and so on. So, you know, just to be clear, when we were first established in 1920, we called ourselves the Voteless League of Women Voters, because we didn't have a vote. So just to be clear now about where we are in the Senate, we have 46 congressional supporters in the Senate. We need 4 more. So we're focused on key states with our outreach and mobilization. And for example, this spring, we gave presentations to our sister leagues in Maine and West Virginia to activate their membership to advocate for statehood. So we don't do this work alone. We have an ecosystem of organizations advocating for statehood, and we're very open to collaboration. And a key example of how we do this is that one part of the DC Statehood Coalition is focused on state legislatures. And they're focused on putting out resolutions in support of DC statehood at the state legislature level. And so as soon as they hear about one, then they bump it over to us. And then I get to make sure that the league in that state at least knows that this initiative has been happening in their state legislature. And sometimes they can, send a quick letter in or provide testimony or, and sometimes they can't. It's up to them. So then the other things that I want to show you is we've got a social media campaign called #Picture51. And basically what this is a movement to foster visibility for DC residents and allies, to show the world what DC statehood means and why we need it, and the fact that, we're actual real people in real DC. And so it's we're looking for a hopeful, forward-looking conversation about DC statehood. And so, it's an opportunity to express ourselves, share with the world what life is like in DC, and what statehood means to you. And so you can use #Picture51 if you're on Twitter. And so, this last time we were at Turkey Thicket, that's the 51 star flag there is at Turkey Thicket. Then we've been at the Monroe Street Market because I'm in Northeast DC, so this is close. And we had the first time we did a table. Thank goodness we can table now. We had kids drawing pictures of our state bird, which is a wood thrush. And this last time we had pictures of the state fish, which is the American shad. And so next time we're going to do the scarlet oak, which is our tree. And then just this past Monday, our board approved a new part of this effort. We have a group we're partnering with that'll be launching quilts for DC, which is a quilting challenge focused on DC statehood. So if you've got quilters in your group, maybe they'll want to participate. And so the information is going to be up on our website soon. So here's the end of this piece. It's a summary, and we'd love to have a feedback from you. These are the things that we wanted to make sure that you knew. In sum, let me just give you a little, quick update here or summary. The Congress has kicked the can down the road because they can. They have absolute control to act with impunity. Racism, self-dealing, partisanship have all been elements of DC's ongoing lack of representation in our national legislature and our lack of local control. So recent impacts, well, if we were a state, we would have been treated like any other state in last year's distribution of COVID-19 relief funds instead of being used to make a political point. We were a state, we'd be able to pass our own laws, hold our elected officials accountable more directly, and we could have called out the National Guard immediately on January 6th. So concrete actions, talk, write, help people understand that DC's plight is a prime example of voter suppression. And you can always invite a league speaker to a Zoom event. So if you wouldn't mind just putting, 1 to 5, so we know where you are with what you've learned, and 1 is least and 5 is most. And thank you. I'm open for questions and discussion.
Thank you so much, Ann, for that overview. It was very enlightening, especially the first question you asked about when did we lose our rights? And, you know, for a long time, I thought we never had it. You know, the fact that we had it and it was taken away adds fuel to my burn and my fire, to my passion around ensuring that this bill is passed, especially since so many of the questions and so many of the concerns are kind of fabricated, you know, or you know, not as transparent as they need to be, because the rhetoric is, you know, number one, it's unconstitutional. The number two, you know, the partisanship thing. All of the questions you listed earlier were on point, especially from me being a 6th generation Washingtonian. And this misinformation, you know, makes one make up stuff, make up the information, make up facts. And this was very helpful for me. I guess for me, the next step, and I know some of the things that my branch would want more information on, is what happens on June 22nd? Is there anything else that we need to do? You know, this is a call to action at this point. I don't know if you want to do it now or later, but I want to make sure it's on the recording so that we can, you know, send this out, you know.
Yes.
To people. And I'm actually glad that we thought about recording it, because it may end up being that piece that, you know, if people weren't able to make it tonight, that they can go back to and still get the information.
Right. Well, let me just say that, first of all, we now know that the hearing in the Senate, and this is a historic hearing because it's only the 2nd time there's ever been a hearing in the Senate. And this actually has a live bill attached. I mean, you know, the bill has passed the House. So we are actually talking about whether or not there's going to be a vote in the Senate. So the hearing is on Tuesday. It's at 10 a.m. And it's in front of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee of the Senate. And of course, you could go to their website and it will be live streamed from there. We also have the DC Vote is going to have a watch party. Bo Schuff and I will be co-hosting it. I mean, he basically keeps people up to date with what, you know, you can see that, you know, as things go on in the Senate. And then I am basically the fact checker for, you know, what we hear people say, or I add things, or I had historical perspective, that kind of thing. So you could go to www.showupfordc.com, and show up is all, you know, all one word, and it's the number 4dc.com, because that's the place where you can get the latest updates. Now, before the hearing at 8:30 in the morning at 2nd Street and East Capitol Street, that corner, we're going to have a big, huge rally that's basically statehood equals racial justice rally. And there will be lots and lots of people there. I'm not sure who the people who will be speaking, but what we need is homemade signs and people to show up, because here's the bigger context. Next week, I mean, we're calling this Democracy Week, because next week, all week, there's going to be a debate on the Senate floor on S1, which is For the People Act. You know? So, and by the way, DC Statehood is included in For the People Act as a resolution. I mean, it doesn't actually make us a state, but it says, yes, we should be doing this. So we are definitely supporting S1, and we are also supporting S51. And it's all about getting everybody included in you know, all taxpayers, all voters, you know, to be able to be joining our national discussion about these things. Then I just also want to point out that this Saturday is Juneteenth Day. And there's let's see if I can make sure I've got this right. Black Voters Matter Freedom Rides for Voting Rights. Yes, I got it. It's a long title, but that Freedom Ride is going to start in Jackson, Mississippi on the 18th. It's going to visit 9 cities all the way through. And it's also going to show up in DC on the 26th. And there will be a rally welcoming the bus at Freedom Plaza. And I've been seeing a variety of times, but I think it's 12 to 4. There've been a number of different times. So I think they're trying to figure out when the bus will get there. But right now I think it's 12 to 4. But I can also send you, if you don't have that information, there's a website that's going to keep you up to date on those.
That would be great, because I can send a follow-up message to the branch with all these details and all this information.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question. So will there be an actual vote on June 22nd, or is that happening on another day?
This is very important. Yes. No, the first thing that happens when you have a bill in Congress is you need to have a hearing. And so that's what's happening right now. So the hearing will just be people who will be witnesses, and they will be giving their testimony, and they will be asked questions by the senators. And it's usually a setup where you have some senators, you know, from both sides, and they each have like 5 minutes to ask questions. And that's all that's going to happen in the hearing this time. Eventually, there could be a markup of the bill, at which point there would be a vote and that's all in committee. This is all still in the committee, the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. And eventually, if it goes through normal channels, there will be a markup, which means they will be maybe making some amendments or suggesting amendments, and then there will be all kinds of votes, and then there will be a vote that would vote it out of committee. Once it goes out of committee, then it goes to the Senate floor, and then it gets scheduled for a vote depending on how things are going. And of course, I doubt that Senator Schumer would organize a vote if he didn't have the votes. So this is, you know, this is fraught, but this is the farthest we've ever gotten in the entire history of the United States of America. So we're amazing.
So how long do you think it will take from the time of the hearing to an actual possible date for the actual vote?
It's hard to tell. I mean, if we don't get a vote in this particular session, then the bill dies and we'll have to start all over again.
Wow.
But you know, this session goes all the way through the, you know, fall of next year. So it could be as late as that. It's just hard to tell how this is all going to work. There's not a way to tell right now.
Right. So during the briefing, would we hear from those states that opposes the bill, or is it just a select few?
Oh, senators who are members of the committee would be able to ask various questions. And I think that sometimes, depending on how it works, other senators are allowed to come and ask questions too. But never fear, the people who are in the Republican side of the Senate committee will be asking all the questions that and discussing things from their perspective.
Good.
Yes, and so we will hear a full readout of all of the things. I mean, last time in the House, when there was a markup bill and the hearing and the markup on the bill, we had things like, well, they can't be a state because they don't have enough car dealerships and bowling alleys. And I mean, so, we had to have a rally in front of a car dealership, and we wore our bowling shirts and, so, so there are difficult pieces, and they really are reaching for, difficult things. I think, one of the things I've been thinking about is like, why is it that people do this? And I think that aside from it just being like a ridiculous whatever, I think actually what people are trying to do, and I think this is an important thing for us to consider as advocates, is what is a state? What does it look like? I mean, if you think about the state puzzle pieces that you had when you were a kid, and I remember, because I grew up in Texas from 7 to 17, and the piece of the puzzle piece that was Texas had a longhorn steer on it. Well, and then, Kansas has cows and Iowa has corn. And all those, well, what does DC have, and how does this look? And so I think there's an issue about what do we actually look like? And people are trying to get their heads around, what is an urban state like? What how do we see that? How do we understand it? So I think there's some, in the midst of the sort of ridiculous things, there's actually a kernel of people really trying to understand how this actually is. And so, that's how I'm thinking about it. I don't know if that helps, but there you go.
No, it does. It does help a lot. You guys have been doing this for quite some time. And you've heard a lot and you've seen a lot. And so my question would be, in your opinion, what do you think is preventing those those states from voting for DC statehood? What are those things? Because, sometimes alleys and car dealerships, to me, that's just should be easy to say, that's just stupid. But, I would love to hear a logical answer.
Well, I think that at base, it's practical politics, and they are thinking, well, wait a minute, if we allow this Douglas Commonwealth to come in, then there will be 2 Democratic senators added, Yeah. But who knows 20, 30, 50 years down the road what the state will look like. But for now, there would be 2 Democratic senators. There's no way around that. Mm-hmm. And so they are basically doing their best to prevent us from being represented because of a partisan issue. And then let's not forget racism, because it's still there. I think it's endemic in the way that DC has been treated all the way along. Because, you know, DC was the first place that people were freed.
Yep.
And so tons and tons of people came here. Well, excuse me, but why wouldn't they?
Yes. As I mentioned before, our sixth generation. So I'm a sixth generation Washingtonian. So,
Right.
you know, my heritage go all the way back to the 1700s. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And, you know, our own Eleanor Holmes Norton, you know, she talks about her, I think it's her great grandfather who walked away from the plantation and walked into DC to be a free guy.
Yep.
So, you know.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you said that and I didn't have to.
Yeah. Well, we all need to acknowledge what's going on, and we, you know, it just is. So.
But there's things that we can do, and that is what excites me, and that's what excites you know, a lot of my members who reach out to me, or my committee members, about just getting involved, you know, riding this excitement and ensuring that whatever we can do, we'll do it. And you've provided some very solid next steps.
Well, and Kim, let me just say, because you keep talking about states voting, and let me just say, it's senators who vote.
I'm sorry.
But it's important, because part of what we can go and say to senators is, you know, 54% of the people in the United States of America are for DC statehood. And so you're bucking a trend, you know, and how useful is that going to be for you in the future? You know, so it's probably useful to see, you know, what the polling system is for the states where there are senators who are not on board, you know. And oh, and by the way, over time, the first DC statehood bill that was submitted bipartisanly by a representative from Iowa, and a Republican representative from Iowa, Fred Schwengel, and a representative from California, whose name I'm blanking right now because I'm getting tired. So sorry. Ron Dellums. There we go.
Well, I mean, if anyone else have any questions, please put them in the chat area for Ann to answer.
Yeah, I see a familiar name there, Ann LaRoche. Hi, Ann.
Yeah. Hi, Ann. Good to see you.
Well, I'm delighted to see your name here. And you know, you've been with this for a long time. Is there anything you want to add about, you know, where we're going to go next on this whole thing?
Oh, I'm hoping so that we will win, because I talked to a lot of my friends in the rest of the country, and although I haven't seen them for a year, I find that they don't know how important it is to us. And once they do know that, they're appreciative and they're open-minded. But I'm so discouraged by the men that are against us in the Congress. And I was so thrilled that the Senate voted for Juneteenth.
Yes.
And that really gave me hope, because we who come from Texas know that has a super a super significance.
Yeah,
And so I'm just hopeful, but I still think that we individuals can do something to advance this cause. And I also think that we need to start buttonholing those guys from Texas on the Hill and getting out in front of this.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, one of the other things I probably need to just mention to you, Kim, is that we've been running this postcard mailer campaign, and I haven't brought it up because it's finished now, because we're doing it. I mean, I'm out of them, which is lovely. But here's the mailer. Here's the postcard mailer. You can see it's the same picture as that's on the screen. And what you do is you write your friend or relative's name here, and you say, hey, help us out here. And then you send it to them with a first-class stamp. And then when they get it, they open it and they see information about DC Statehood and the 51-star flag. And then they can tear this part off, and you will have put a postcard stamp on this one here, so there's no barrier to them just
Right.
sending it back. But then they put their name and they sign it and they put their zip code. And then they tear it off and they drop it in the mail, and it comes back to the league, and they become a petition signer for statehood, because that's what we asked them to do. Put your name here and join the petition. And we're more than 33% response on this. And we still have people coming in. And like I say, we put out thousands, and they're coming back. And I think they're like at least another couple hundred in the office to be sorted into states. And and we've when you count the online website that the National League has, we have over 12,000 petition signatures that are from all 50 states and a couple of the territories, and even some APO boxes. So
Great.
yeah.
Let's talk about how we can work together on getting that out to not only just our branch members, but some AAUW members all across the United States.
Yeah, I think it has some real potential. I'm very pleased with how it's gone, because we had no idea. We sort of went, okay, well, let's try it.
Right.
And I think this has helped a lot. And so there may be something that will be going.
There's a question in the chat. It's who is presenting who is presenting at the June 22nd hearing?
Let me see. I know that, of course, Mayor Bowser is presenting. There are also several legal constitutional scholars whose names I did not recognize. I know that former Senator Joe Lieberman will be talking. And I don't know the rest of it. I literally had just seen it recently, and so I don't have it all down. But I can send you that information.
Okay. I was going to ask, is there a website that kind of lists what's happening on the hearing, or is there a website that people can go to that can get a little bit more information?
Well, you can always go to www.showup4dc.com, www.showup4dc.com. That's the DC Vote website, and that gives all the activities that we're doing. There's Eleanor Holmes Norton's office also has information on her website about everything about statehood. And she put out a press release that had the list of presenters, of witnesses that will be speaking at the hearing. And that's where I got my information, was from that press release.
Yeah, I'm on the website now. This is very good information, and it talks about the rally, where to meet, and it gives you some more additional information. So definitely, that's a great website, www.showup4dc.com.
Yeah, and they're doing a very good job of being very clear and giving you what you need rather than
Yeah. Well, is there anything else? I mean, I don't want to take up any more of people's time here. I do appreciate everyone coming out. Again, for the newcomers, this is going to be recorded. This is being recorded, and we'll put it up on our website as well as the League of Women Voters DC website as well, so that anyone who weren't able to make it today or tonight, that they can go back to it at any point and get this valuable information and be prepared for the hearing that's happening on the 22nd. Now, tell me again, Ann, how can people get involved in the watch party?
Okay, well, the showup4dc.com will have a link to the watch party.
Got it.
So that's the place. And it'll start at 10 when, assuming that the hearing starts on time, and so far hearings have seemed to start on time. So,
good.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah. There you are, Ann.
Hi, Ann. Hi, Sherry.
Hi.
Hi, Diane. So if there are any other questions, is there anything else you want to say, Ann?
I think I've pretty much done what I needed to do. So unless there's something else that somebody wanted to mention.
I am fine. This has been excellent information. I'm glad we were able to record it so people can always go back to it. These are some great questions. I mean, I'm just keeping my fingers crossed, my toes crossed, everything crossed, and hope that, the senators get a clue.
Well, and, I think it's really important that, that I have a whole team. So it's not just me. There are a whole bunch of folks who've actually been trained to give these presentations. So, please feel free to reach out to me if an AAUW branch in some other state says, well, but we don't know enough.
Yes.
We are happy to just zoom in for them. So.
And that's great. That's great. And we will definitely take you up on that. This was just the first one, so that we can have this before the hearing. But I'm quite sure, we will have more of these to give more people the opportunity to get involved. Because, like we started out earlier today, after a long day of work, and if you've been Zooming all day, you just get tired. So we'll just offer this on a couple other different times and dates for individuals to take part, and then it can be a little more engaging.
Yeah. Okay.
Is it all right if I mention something?
Yes.
League of Women Voters of Gunnison Valley. We're in Colorado. We're a small league, but we thought up this thing called United We Sit, Divided We Fail. And they're letters that go to your elected officials. It went all across the state, and then it went national. So we gave a little presentation on that in May at League of Women Voters US. So it ended up being a good thing because, you're sending these very canned letters, and this particular one was on civil disobedience, but most certainly they could be on this subject, the DC Statehood. And you're just firing off letters to your elected officials. Every league does their own with their own elected officials and so on. And then today, because we created a suffrage quilt, we met with the girls that were part of this Quilts for DC,
Yes.
the Statehood Quilt Challenge. And we kind of reviewed their little proposal, and it's wonderful. It's truly good. And it's also really exciting. And so that they're gonna, kind of work with that over the summer, and then hopefully they will have entries from all 50 states. And it's basically drawing attention to DC statehood with all these creative types of things that are, material and sewing and that sort of thing, with a rich history of using quilts for political purposes, all throughout of history. And so that's a, something that's really kind of exciting, and they're league members. And so just wanted to draw your attention to both of those, really, because that letter campaign ended up being really powerful, and it could totally just be morphed into this. It's off our website. It's the recording is on the US website and our website. And, so it's a simple concept.
So it's LWV Gunnison Valley?
Yeah, just Gunnison.
Gunnison.
So lwvgunnison.org. And it's right on front and center on the website, and also the quilt presentation, and also the whole national presentation, which we just gave last month. It's it has timing, so you don't have to go through the whole thing if you don't want to. But those gals at US are just really, really nice. We worked with Alma Cuvethier and Luana Chaves, and they were both just really accommodating.
That's
And this,
great.
I am so excited about the DC statehood. I mean, seriously, I can barely contain myself. I hope. But, it really does need to be a call for action. We really do need to call everybody right now, because they need to have an awareness that it's happening, or it's just going to slide on,
Yep,
by.
you got that right.
Definitely. And we definitely want to have a letter campaign, whatever that's going to look like. We're going to need you guys' expertise on trying to figure out how to do that. And, and we talked a little bit about it, but I love the fact that Sherry, you brought it up again, especially during this forum, because I think that letter campaigns have always been successful. And so if we can jump on board and we can partner with what you guys are already doing and not have to recreate the wheel, I think it'll be easier for us to get it to our people, and they can get it to their people, and you know how it goes from there. So
Yeah.
We're definitely interested. So let's,
So
circle
can we take your idea and just morph it and make it?
Absolutely. You bet. It's simple,
Okay.
simple. Ours is on reaching across the aisle and figuring out ways to communicate with each other without all this haranguing that we're all observing all the time. And so it's just this very simple letter that everybody sent out in our league and all of Colorado, and also now it's been presented to national. We've had a lot of interest there. So it's really simple, and anybody in league is going to know who your representatives are in your area, and that will always be a different senator and that sort of thing. And so
Right.
it ends up being, and when they get a lot of letters from league, they pay attention.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So when you got a little stack of letters and from all these different leagues, you're going, hey, wait a minute, this might be something to look at,
That's right. That's right. So can I just tell one little story? So back in the 90s, when we actually had a vote in the House that failed, but we were still working. And we had some people who were going up on the Hill and visiting congressional offices. And one of the guys went to a representative from Colorado, and they basically blew him off. It was like, well, but in the meantime, I had some friends in Colorado. And so I called them up. I mean, this is before cell phones, right? Before email. I called them up and I said, hey, can you call your representatives? And, because, we really need statehood. And so they actually did it. They called their representative. So, but I had no contact with our little guy who was going up on the hill. So anyway, next week he goes up and he goes to this congressional office from Colorado, and they are like, wait, come in here. We need to find out, because there are some constituents who asked us about this. And so I don't think that the representative voted for it, but we got a hearing because there were constituents who were concerned.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
That's exciting. That's exciting.
Yeah, it was fun. And that's always fun to remember. It's like, yeah, you guys who have votes in the House and the Senate, yeah, you actually make a difference when you call them. So,
You listen.
yeah. Well, thank you very much. This has been really fun.
Yep.
Please say hello to Harriet.
I will.
Thank her for this connection. I don't know, Anne, were you there? Remember when we first did, I don't know if you were at the very first one that we did, we tried this out, and it was at Harriet Madden's house, and she was an AAUW, it was an AAUW group. And we had a big sheet up across her bookshelf to show it, because we didn't have a screen.
A screen. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah.
When
So
was that? Do you remember what year that was?
Well, it had to have been like 14 or something like that, or
Oh, okay.
15,
Uh-huh.
because it was one of the first times that we were trying out our PowerPoint. So,
Oh, okay.
Wow.
yeah.
I love
Well,
it.
and we're trying to really work with DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we've been to several AAUW trainings, and they're really, really good. So I've probably been to 4 in the last 2 years, one in Aurora, always really skilled speakers and done very, very well. So there's a lot of committed AAUW members in Colorado that are totally behind this kind of thing.
I love it.
That's good news.
That is good news. And thanks for sharing that, Sherry. Thanks very much for sharing that.
Absolutely. Deserve all the credit. They put on wonderful trainings.
Yes. And I mean, I appreciate all of this. I really do. I mean, it just makes me feel like, that there's other people out here who is fighting the same fight, who is on the same team, and then we can work together and collaborate all for the same goals. And this is exciting to me as well.
All right. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
have a
Thank you,
good
Ann.
evening.
And we'll be in touch, Ann, definitely.
Okay.
Well done.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Good to
Ann.
meet you, Sherry.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye. And you need